We'll reconvene as the Kennewick County Health and Human Services Committee.
We're going to explain what happened.
Oh, yes, for those who are watching on video, we had a power outage and the generators kicked in and brought the power back up, but it took us a few minutes to get the systems all going and the audiovisual equipment working. So please proceed, Tammy.
Okay, so we're going to continue on talking about our evidence-based practices, and just to recap, we were talking about our carry guides and some of the tools that we used with justice-involved individuals. And as Crystal talked about, what we're really looking at is we need to change behavior, right? To reduce recidivism, to affect crime and reduce the amount of crime that happens in our community, we need to work with these individuals who committed crimes and change their behaviors. To change behaviors, we got to look at our thinking and our feelings to be able to make those changes. And so the tools that we use, we're lucky to have lots of different options. We walked you through, talked about Thinking for a Change as one of our group programs that we can use somewhat in individual format. We also have carry guides, which we use on an individual basis with our offenders every single day. There's a variety of different topics, and I did, during the break, I handed them out a little bit, but if anybody watching wants to know more about them, we have lots of copies of these in our office. But we even go through the first one we start with is Your Guide to Success. And it's really helping to motivate offenders into understanding that making this change will benefit them as well as reduce crime and get them off probation. But it's a way to address antisocial thinking. We can address anger issues, problem solving, helping individuals achieve the goals that they want to set for themselves going forward. So when we talk about dosage, and actually if you get down to the legislature, sometimes you can see some of these things. They're talking about dosage and probation and across the state. Washington County in Minnesota actually is a leader in dosage probation. They did a national pilot project, and we're hearing more and more talk about that and trying to implement those types of ideas into our probation world to have that impact. We know that a large number of offenders without having any interventions are going to commit new crimes. And our goal is to keep that from happening. And so what research is telling us is that by dosage and intensity, we can have the greatest bang for our buck, essentially. And what that means is 100 hours of direct service. Now that means 100 hours of really intensive service with these individuals can help create that change for a high-risk individual, or for an individual. And then it can go as high as 200 to 300 hours for a high-risk individual. We know change is hard. And the change I'm talking about is changing life changes, right? I mean, it's changing your thinking, changing who your friends are, making sure you're getting employed. These are lifelong changes. And so it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. So our probation officers are trained to go in and spend that 100 hours, that 200 hours, that 300 hours with them, doing the carry guides that we talked about, doing group where we talk about some of the same things and problem solving. And they are also trained in terms of doing those role plays that Crystal talked about. And we do role plays because if anybody's tried to quit smoking or quit using alcohol or just making a major life change in our lives, we know that it's easy to fall back into old thinking patterns. And so role plays give us the ability to practice. So if an individual comes in and says, I got into a fight with my spouse, or I got into a fight with my child, or somebody in my life, and this is what happened, the probation officer can sit down and go through with them and brainstorm ideas of how they might have handled it differently. And then sometimes they'll play either side and give somebody the ability to practice what they want to say and a better way to handle the conflict that's happening in their life. So 100 hours of direct service is a minimum, and that's not, and like I said, that's like direct service, intensive, talking in one-to-one or in a group, 3 to 9 months long, and practice. That's what we're doing with these individuals to try and change those behaviors. Probation is a lot more than a lot of people think, and so that's why I wanted to bring those pieces in. We talked about, before we've had staff come in and talking about moving on, and I think a few of you even got to go to our moving on graduation ceremonies, where we've had, that's our program for criminal justice involved women. Carry guides, Thinking for a Change, and Decision Points are all programs that can go both men and women, for both men and women. And as Crystal also said, we are super excited that we're going to start this program, Decision Points. We are starting with 6 of our staff now, but we're going to do another training in the fall. And hopefully all of my staff will be trained in Decision Points because it gives us that ability to do one-on-one work on an open-ended basis. Because when we talk about thinking for a change as a group, it's 26 sessions, and you have to start with one group and end with those same individuals, which becomes really difficult when we're working with people coming in and out of the jail or probation. We don't always have the same people. So having open-ended programs gives us that ability to change things up and move around. So, questions? Anybody have questions or thoughts as you're taking a look at this? And
Any questions for Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tammy Jo, thank you, and Crystal, thank you as well for this presentation. This really is, this type of programming is entirely different than what probation used to be even, 10, 15 years ago?
yeah,
Change is hard, and change is also lifelong. I see what you're doing here as trying to give people the tools they need to get to that next step. And then hopefully they're able to access some other resources later on, not just to not reoffend, but to make their lives better and the lives of the people around them better.
so actually some of the things we work with the individuals on very specifically is how to establish pro-social support systems. Because a lot of the individuals we work with don't have a lot of pro-social support systems, so kind of exactly like you said, of how do they establish those things going forward. And that's, as we go through the programs, each one of these programs has something in there that says, how do you meet people that are pro-social? How do you develop things in your life that are pro-social? Because what we do really has an impact on what's happening or the people we're around.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got
Go ahead.
So when the power outage happened, and I just happened to ask Mrs. Roloffs about the probation, what you guys do as probation officers, and it is way different than a person imagines. Like you said, it isn't like on TV where it's real dramatic or whatever. But you sit down, and you actually act like kind of like their personal counselor type situation is how I understand it now. And so it's good to hear this. You guys give this presentation, and then I was also skimming through this 3-ring binder that you handed us to look at, and it does talk about family, and that is really kind of where it really needs to start, is back when people are raising their children. We're always talking about expenses in the county and how things get to be so expensive. And I like to tell people, well, if you want to reduce the costs in the county, I think it starts with the family, and raise up your children the way they should be as they're adults, because it gets real hard to change them if you're not doing your job as a parent. And a lot of times the families are broken too, but it does tell about how to deal with that a little bit. So I just thank you guys for doing what you do. And that's all more of a comment than a question, I guess.
So you brought up the fact that there's a family piece in there, and that's actually really a really important part, because you talk to any probation officer or law enforcement officer, especially, they're going to tell you that we see intergenerational crime and the fact that the same people coming through the system, because we haven't reached them yet. We haven't got to them in help them make those changes. So then at one point when I was a probation officer, I actually had 3 generations of one family on probation. And so you have that happening again and again. But family can also be a protective factor, especially for women, but for everybody, in terms of the fact that people don't want to be bad parents. I mean, they really want to do good. And so by helping provide the skills and the problem solving and the abilities to change their behaviors, it actually works the other way too. Not only helping their kids, but it helps them. The more they build for pro-social activities and pro-social family, the less likely they're going to be in trouble.
I do have a question about, I see and hear the excitement for staff for this program, has it been introduced yet to prospective clients? And if it has, what is their reaction to it?
Decision points?
Yeah, or I'd go on Carry Guides. Like,
Are you talking about decision points, the new
Yes.
one? We haven't brought that to our clients yet. We were looking at the training and just reviewing the material for the training, and having been facilitating the other ones. It is very similar to what we have done in the past, but it really hones in on the risk and the ownership and being open-ended, and just a lot of things that we can take the great things from all of these programs and put it into one. That would probably be a new hybrid, I guess, is if you will. But so our clients have not received that yet.
just an example of when you presented a Carry Guide or something. And they're
Well, and I imagine that you guys didn't start this program, so there's others that are using it, and you're operating from some level of experience, not your own experience, but other people's experiences
Right.
in adopting this program.
So I'll have her talk about like presenting like Carry Guides to offenders or individuals and different people that we're talking to and their reaction to it. But it's interesting you meant where it came from. This program, the Carry Guides, was made by Mark Carey, who actually came from Minnesota. He actually was a director in Stearns County and then was our commissioner of corrections years ago. And this is what he's been doing the last couple of years, is creating this. So
And as you go through that, what does the rollout look like? Time frame and
Good question. Okay, so having been an agent for a long time before we started doing these things, you'll see patterns, and clients used to come into an appointment and know that they had a certain amount of your time, and if they could talk to you for that time, they could get to the next time and everything. So when you introduce these types of interventions, because we have turned into the intervention, we are the ones that, yes, they are court ordered to do this, but we are the ones that also can help them out of it or help them get through it. So the typical appointment is going to be a 5-minute check-in. How are you doing on your court-ordered conditions? What are you doing with life? And then the next 15 minutes to a half an hour is going to be a specific intervention. And these are, just for example, the Carry Guides, they're broken up into tools. And so they're broken up into sections that I can do in 15 minutes to a half an hour that counts towards that dosage. And the first couple times you go through this with a client, they're just like, are you kidding me? No, let's talk about you. Let's talk about where you're at with things. And so instead of them taking my time and telling me this, I can structure the time in a way that helps them move forward. And after you get through that initial kind of shock, they're excited to come in with their appointments because they're accomplishing something and they're bringing something to you. Look at what I'm doing. This is good. This is good. And then they're getting empowered that they can do the right thing too. And so it works both ways. It helps with office structure. It helps make the time meaningful. But it also gives the clients confidence that they're completing something, because I'll tell them, if you get through this and you've got your conditions done and you're halfway done with probation, I am happy to write an early discharge to the court and let everybody know all the good things that you're doing, because you've earned it. You deserve it.
So is this a cumulative program? So you start with one and then move your way through, or is it a la carte and say, I think you're a good candidate for the third one in the stack or whatever that is? Because as I look at that, as someone who's not facing having to begin a program like that, it looks a little daunting to me. There's a lot of stuff there and a lot of homework that may be presented and that I might have to go through. Sure, I'm motivated because I want the early release from probation, or I want to turn my life around, but talk about that a little
It
bit.
can be daunting. I'm not going to lie. If you sit down and try to get buy-in somebody to go into a 25 session, 2 hours at a time, once or twice a week with a probation officer, nobody's lining up to do that. Well, very few. But once you use motivational interviewing and you start to use that iceberg analogy. We talk about a toolbox. What happens if you go to a job and I only give you a hammer, and the only thing you can use to get that job done is a hammer? you're not going to get very far, right? So what happens if we take this time that you're going to be on probation, because you're already going to be on probation, and use it to fill your toolbox so that you can do that job and be successful with it, and hopefully not keep coming back, and maybe even be a good example to your family or those around you. And most of the time, people do not want to be on probation. People do not want to be in trouble with the law. They really want to do right, and they really want to change. It's just kind of feeding what is that driver in that person to initiate and grab that change. And that's what these tools help us do and reinforce it.
And one of the things I didn't mention on dosage too, when we talk about dosage, which we haven't moved that far into this realm yet, but dosage in its entirety means that somebody is assigned a certain number of hours of treatment, not a probation sentence. So the judge in dosage probation says, you have to complete 300 hours of dosage probation intensive treatment, and then you can be discharged. And if that takes you 2 years or it takes you 10 years, it's up to you. And so it's restructuring the whole concept of how we look at things. We don't let people just sit on probation anymore and say, oh, I'm just going to do my time, is part of the process, so.
Commissioner Hennig.
Yeah, thanks. I was just curious what your caseload is, approximately, how many right now?
So we base caseload on risk level right now, and it's a little challenging because this is something new for the staff in terms of moving people around, because as you can imagine, when somebody's doing really well, my probation officers want to keep them, right? Because those are the people that are fun to deal with. But the reality is I need my high-risk probation officers to work with high-risk people. So that means we're moving cases around a lot. So to understand that. But right now, our low-risk caseload sits, if somebody's supervising with low-risk cases, and we have several of them, they're not doing this type of intervention with them. Because if we go back to the risk principle, it says that, you know, we got to target our interventions with the high-risk people. Low-risk people, we can actually make higher risk by doing too much with. So our low-risk caseloads right now are about 100, and they can go up to, you know, some places actually, Hennepin just said last week at the legislature, their low-risk caseloads are sitting at 2,500. So we're pretty lucky. Low-risk caseloads usually are 100 to 250 is what people look at right now. So right now, we're doing a little restructuring on that. And you have medium risk and high risk. And then we have our specialized caseloads, because we have a lot of domestic violence, we have a lot of mental illness, and sex offender caseloads. Those are specialized, and they're sitting usually about 40 to 50, maybe 60, depending on what's going on. And then we have our traditional supervision that we're going to keep those around under 60. So it's a lot of people to try and do this with, right? And try and make sure that we are effective. But it is changing how we work with individuals to make sure that we can be.
Yeah, and it probably is better now that when you can start out when they're still in jail, they're probably more open to meet with somebody because they probably have a lot less to do when they're sitting in there.
So, and we always have started in the jail and met with them, but this idea of bringing jail staff in means that we're going to do a group in the jail
Okay,
with jail staff and start the process there, and then they will be transferred into the community. So they will do the same thing of group treatment stuff in the jail as they are in the community with the same people. So hopefully it'll help with that transition.
yeah.
Commissioner Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of this information, I'm assuming, and I think actually a lot of your staff are aware of all these different tools and practice on a daily basis. But the cool thing about it, somebody put it together in a curriculum. And now you can do these creative things. And I would guess it'd be exciting times for some of the staff to be able to sit down with groups like that and to work together with this. It's a good progress. It's the next step to go, I think, in this whole probation.
And kind of like when you were talking about earlier, and what we did was we took all of these and we put them on a magazine rack so my staff can pick and choose. Some of them we do with everybody, right? The Guide to Your Success, we do with everyone. But if a probation officer knows something in advance or different things, they can go in and they can pick a different one. So like if somebody says, oh, I had an issue with anger this week, they can pick the anger one. Or if it's had to do with antisocial thinking or problem solving, or, you know, there's lots of different topics that we can use.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So to go back to my question about progression versus a la carte. So there is a form of a la carte here. You just mentioned
Yep.
the anger one. if that's the appropriate one.
So there's some we want to do with everybody, and then there's some that we can pick and choose.
And does everybody get everything?
No,
eventually?
because
Okay.
there's a section on using methamphetamine, right? So that wouldn't apply to everybody. So it's picking and choosing which ones are applicable to each individual.
Very good. So if there's no more questions and you are finished with your presentation, I'll thank you.
Thank you.
And you handled that interruption just fine. So we'll see you at your next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job, thank you.
Nice presentation.
So we have no updates, administrative updates, so I will adjourn the Kennewick County Health and Human Services Committee.